by Bagilan, and we are the discussants for today.
What is communicative approach? The communicative approach is based on the idea that the learning language successfully comes through having to communicate in real meaning. When the learners are involved in real communication, their natural strategies for language acquisition will be used, and this will allow them to learn to use the language theory, the audiolingual method, and the situational language teaching method were questioned by prominent linguists like Chomsky, 1957. A new trend of language teaching paved its way into our classrooms.
Communicative language teaching or CLT, which is an approach to the teaching of second and foreign language, emphasizes interaction as both the means and the ultimate goal of learning a language. It is also referred to as the communicative approach. Historically, CLT has been seen as a response to the audiolingual method or ALM, and as an extension or development of the notional functional syllabus. Task-based language learning, a more recent requirement of CLT, has gained considerable in popularity.
Example: practicing question forms by asking learners to find out personal information about colleagues is an example of the communicative approach, as it involves meaningful communication. Teacher acts as facilitators in the learning process. In the communicative approach, learners are at the center of instruction. That means that the teacher's role has changed when compared to previous methodologies, such as audiolingual and the direct method. The teacher is now seen as facilitator in the learning process, and some of the responsibilities attributed them. These are as follows. Roles of the teacher in the communicative approach. First, setting the communicative context of the lesson. Second, managing learners and creating opportunities for communication. Third, maintaining learner motivation. Establishing a welcoming and safe environment. Fifth, giving and setting activities. Lastly, monitoring learning and providing constructive.
The proponent of the communicative language teaching approach, Noam Chomsky, the theorist in the 1960s, focusing on competence and performance in language learning that gave rise to communicative language teaching. But the conceptual basis for CLT was laid in the 1970s by linguist Michael Halliday, who studied how language functions are expressed through grammar. Del Himes, who introduced the idea of a wider communicative competence instead of Chomsky's narrower linguistic competence.
Advantages and disadvantages of CLT. Advantages: communicative approach is much more pupil-oriented because it is based on pupils' needs and interests. Communicative approach seeks to personalize and localize language and adapt it to interests of pupils. Meaningful language is always more easily retained by the learners. Seeks to use authentic resources, and that is more interesting and motivating for children. Children acquire grammar rules as necessity to speak, so is more proficient and efficient.
The disadvantages of CLT: it pays insufficient attention to the context in which teaching and learning take place. The communicative approach often seems to be interpreted as if the teacher understands the students, we have good communication, but native speakers of the target language can have great difficulty understanding students. Another disadvantage is that the CLT approach focuses on fluency but not accuracy. The approach does not focus on error reduction, but instead creates a situation where learners are left using their communication problems. Thus, they may produce incoherent, grammatically incorrect sentences.
Conclusions and implications. The present review compared teachers and learners, their reasons, and beliefs towards principle of CLT in Iran and other countries. Their comparisons show that the most of the teachers and learners held positive attitudes towards CLT. However, there were difficulties in implementing CLT principles in the classroom which should be considered by the teacher.
It was found that the teachers were tired of using traditional methods that required the learners to memorize grammar rules, so they leaned toward this approach. In addition, CLT considers core skills: listening, reading, writing, and speaking, which should be taught in a communicative way together. It provides such as environment for learners to lower their anxiety and stress in the class.
Finally, in CLT, the role of the teachers and learners are different from those in traditional approaches. I hope in that video you have learned something. That will be all.